Good morning. Welcome to this County Commission meeting for May 8th. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please silence all your cell phones and join us in a moment of silent prayer. I'll begin a roll call this morning with Commissioner Doug Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Stephen.
Here.
Commissioner Vicki Cos.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Smith.
Here.
And Commissioner Jeff Culberson is here. Public comment. Don't have anybody signed up. Does anybody in the audience have a public comment? If not, we'll move on to administrative business. Mr. Lother, you have something this morning?
Commissioners, on the agenda you have the Leavenworth County Audit Review. This is under administrative business because it does not take any action, but April Barney with Barney and Associates is here to present your annual audit.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Well, it was a beautiful drive into Leavenworth this morning. We had tornadoes in Manhattan Monday on both sides of me, and we stood and watched and looked at our storm shelter and just stood there and didn't even go in it. So I don't know what's wrong with it, but
True Kansas.
It's really nice to have a beautiful day now. The audit, we came out early again this year. Leavenworth is the second county that we do each year. They're always ready for us, and that is a lot in part to Janet and Debbie. I cannot leave Debbie out because she does provide us a lot of information. We did come out on site for field work. We do a lot of the work ahead of time before we come, and then we come on site and finish the work. You should have a burgundy binder and a letter. We're going to start with the letter. The letter is called the Required Governance Communication Letter. So you are who we work for, governance. Although we work with Janet and we work with other elected officials and department heads, we work for you as a county governing body. You report under what's known as the KMAG model, which we've talked about each year. You do not follow GAAP, General Accepted Accounting Principles. You follow the KMAG model, which is regulated by the state of Kansas. So we always like to point out in that second paragraph that although these financials are bound by us and given to you, it all comes from the source information provided by your staff, administration, and employees. And they are your responsibility. Our responsibility is to issue an opinion on whether we feel they're fairly stated in all material respects. So I want to talk a little bit about material respects. So, there is materiality, and sometimes we say it's good enough for hand grenades, horseshoes, and auditors, but that's really kind of a joke. So there is a materiality threshold, and let's just say, for example, with a county your size, we would look at a materiality threshold of maybe 300,000, 350,000 would be, and what we use that for is we say, if you had errors that accumulated to more than that amount of money, we feel that would be a material effect on your financials. So that is the top threshold. But then underneath that, our testing goes way lower, down to as low as 10% of materiality. And if we find errors, we don't just say, oh, it's under materiality, we don't report those. If we find errors or mistakes or concerns, they are all directed to administration, whoever our key point person is, and then adjustments are proposed. In the case of Leavenworth County, we have never had to propose an adjusting entry with the exception of the first year. The first year, you had moved from one payroll accounting system to another payroll accounting system, and there were some errors in the way the withholdings and the vendor payments were handled. And so we proposed an entry. It was like $400,000, and it was made, and that was the first year. Payroll got straightened out, and moving forward, we have not had to propose adjustments. In the letter also, if you'll turn to the second page of the letter, there's two sections where we talk about misstatements. So there's a paragraph called uncorrected and corrected. So you say, why would there be uncorrected misstatements? That very reason. Let's say, for example, the interest on a CD is not booked by the county until January the 2nd, but the bank recorded it on December 31, and it's $2,000. Okay, we might say, we're not going to make an adjustment for that. It's a timing difference. But all uncorrected adjustments have to be reported to you under auditing standards. So if we found errors that we did not correct, they have to be reported to you and provided in detail attached to this letter. So I just want to clarify that. And then you'll notice in the second paragraph under that same section, we are to communicate also to you all material corrected misstatements, and there were no misstatements identified for the year of 2023. So any questions on that? Okay, so having said that, with materiality, we can't look at every transaction that happens in the county. So we assess risk, where does the risk lie, and that's how we determine how we do our testing. So if you'll turn to page 1 of the binder, of the burgundy binder, you'll see the first 2 paragraphs talk about adverse opinions. That's because you report under KMAG, not GAAP. So those first 2 opinions are simply saying we do not report under GAAP. This report layout is designed and enforced by the state of Kansas KMAG department. The third paragraph is our clean opinion, or our unmodified opinion. So we do feel that the financial statements presented here, the aggregate cash, unencumbered cash, receipts, and expenditures for the year are reported fairly in all material respects. So it is a clean opinion. Your county also usually every year spends enough federal money that you receive also a single audit. So in that 4th paragraph, we also, in addition to mentioning KMAG and auditing standards, we also mention government auditing standards because you fall under the Uniform Guidance Federal requirement, and so you are also subject to government auditing standards. One of those requirements is that everyone that works on your job has to have a certain number of CPE hours every year in government auditing, strictly government auditing. And then if you'll turn to page 4, this is actually the financial statement for the county, and it's multiple pages. There are 3 pages. Down the left-hand side are the funds that the county uses to record the transactions, the ins and the outs during the year. We start with your unencumbered cash. By fund, we show your total receipts. So in the case of the general fund, the first one, you took in $31.8 million. You expended $33.6 million, leaving you with unencumbered cash of $3.8 million. Now, at the end of the year, there are accounts payable and encumbrances that are outstanding. And so in order to get to the ending cash balance, book reconciled balance, we add those back because although they are expenditures for last year, they're not taken out of cash until the next year. They're paid after the end of the year. So we add those back to get our ending cash balances. So as you scan down through there, if you go to page 5, you can see that there's a subtotal about 2/3 of the way down. So that's where the county funds stop, the actual county funds. Then down below you also have some related municipal entities, which are your sewer districts. And so those get reported. They are included in the scope of the audit, and so they are tested through the normal testing that we do. And then you come to the bottom there for your total reporting entity, which is your primary county plus your related municipal entities. And then if you'll turn finally to page 6, this is a summary of where your cash was at the end of the year. And in your case, we show it by bank. We don't always present it by bank. It's not required. But you can see the bulk of your money is in checking and CD accounts, as well as you had about $1.6 million in the Kansas Municipal Investment Pool. So we come to our total cash of $118 million, but about $78 million of that belongs to other organizations like cities, schools, libraries. This is money the county treasurer has collected on behalf of those entities that have mill levies, and that money will be remitted to them, most of it in January, and so it doesn't belong to the county. So the county's funds are that $40,624,622, which then ties back to that total on the prior page, which is the county plus the related municipal entities. Any questions on that?
They only receive that money during January. They don't get another half of it.
It goes out, but the bulk of big payments in January, but then you've got the additional payments. And they're still collecting, and it's an ongoing process. But the bulk of it goes out right away.
How many years have you been our auditor?
We started in 2019.
2019.
Then if you'll start on page 7, these are the footnotes to the financials. They are not, I'm not going to go through all the footnotes. There were no new ones required this year, but the footnotes are there to provide you more information and the citizens that are interested in reading more information about how the county operates, what's included in your report, what basis of accounting you use, what types of funds you use, all of that basic static information. I'm going to point out a couple of things, though. If you will turn to page 10. Page 10 is a footnote on deposits and investments. So this year we did have one day, a part of a day, where depository coverage was not adequate. So one of the things that we test for during our audit is the county is required, when they have public funds on deposit, they are required to have those secured. There's a agreement between the county and the bank, and maybe another entity that's holding the securities for the bank, that says we need you to pledge for our accounts. It's an understanding, it's in writing. However, it is the county's responsibility to make sure those pledges are in place. So what happened here is one pledge was pulled out and a new one was substituted, but left a day where the coverage was not adequate. Now the bank did not fail, so there no harm happened, but the statute does require that depository coverage is a daily requirement and must be checked. And so that's one of the areas where the treasurer's got to really be on top of what are my deposits and what's going out. That sometimes some treasurers, they're tracking it so close, they know exactly what went in that day, they know what they think's going out that day, because during those high tax times, December, May, you have a lot of money that's sitting in those banks, and so you've got to make sure that it's covered. And in our current environment, bank closings, they're happening again. It does happen.
Yeah.
The Kansas Municipal Investment Pool is an option. That money is secured in a different way, so you don't have to have pledging for that. And a lot of times we've seen lately banks, it's hard for banks to pledge, so you may have to spread your money around a little bit more. Sometimes banks are in a situation where they can't pledge the full amount. Some counties use peak periods. Your county does not, but a peak period allows you to only cover half of those peak time deposits. But although it's allowed by statute, as auditors, we do not recommend it, because if the bank failed, you've lost half your money. So we had a banker call last year and say, why do you tell people they shouldn't do peak periods? Well, because it's just not good practice. Now, they can legally do it, but we don't recommend it.
So if you're doing an audit and you find multiple days like this, then you're going to note that on your audit that there's been problems on multiple days.
Yes, so we did put it in the footnote because we felt like it was a statutory violation. It is there. It is not in the governance letter. We are allowed to communicate things either orally or in writing. If we felt like it was a systemic problem and they did not understand what they were doing and pledge it, we had one treasurer in a new county we took on that said she didn't even really know what that was, which really gave me some concern. So we helped and showed, here's a spreadsheet how to track it. Then it would be what we call an internal control deficiency. And we would either put it in the governance letter, or if we felt it rose to a high enough level, we would issue a significant deficiency letter.
So, do you feel like our, overall, this was a macro question, our county treasurers are adequately trained initially when they come into these positions to function in that job? It seems like it's a really it's a very important job, and it seems like the training level. We've transitioned to a new treasurer, and it seems like it's a pretty big steep climb to learn all those things.
I'm going to speak candidly. To me, electing people to those positions, they should be hired with the skills that are required for that job, but that's not how our government works. They're elected. But
Does that sound familiar, Mark?
Some counties do.
Yeah, they do.
Some counties do. You can home rule out of that. The treasurers, now every county operates different. Some counties, like in this county, our key point for the audit's the clerk's office. However, we work very closely always did with Jennifer in the treasurer's office to get the things we need from over there. Some counties, we went to a new county, the treasurer was our point person. But what I've seen is we have many treasurers that have no financial background. They come from a different background, they ran for a different reason, and they are coming into one of the most complicated positions in all government.
Yep.
You've got to levy tax, you've got to distribute it right. You mess it up. There's a county right now that is so messed up. Schools aren't getting their money, cities aren't getting their money, libraries aren't getting their money because the county treasurer, in this case the clerk, they all quit and no one knows how to do the job. So I don't know where you get that training. One of you spoke to me at the conference in Wichita about, well, if we get a new treasurer that doesn't know what they're doing, we may need you guys to come in and train them. I can't train a treasurer, I'm telling you right now. I know the function of a treasurer, and I know the end result, and I know the things I'm testing. I don't know where you get training for a treasurer.
I think the Treasurers Association, every one of these things, like city managers, and they all have their association. I think they provide some training, maybe not to the depth of a new person coming on, but at least the starting point. Maybe they can get relayed from there. So
I think the key point is, though, every county has different software. So it's not only learning what am I supposed to do, how do I do it in the software? How do I know what I'm doing? To me, it's got to be a really smooth transition between the prior treasurer, the new treasurer, and the staff in the office, because, quite frankly, they're the ones that are doing the job and have been doing it.
Yes. That's where I say that, probably when you have your deputies or whatever, they're the people that are actually qualified. I mean,
exactly,
that
because you
have
hired
the
them.
background because they're hired and they have to have a certain level of competency in order to even be placed into that position.
Exactly.
And so, but if we don't have that requirement, then, within treasurers probably should come with some level of credentialing.
It seems like the state of Kansas is being a little bit inept when we have our public school funding is handled through these departments, and we're not mandating that these treasurers be adequately trained. It doesn't seem.
I'm 100% in agreement with that.
Well, but when a treasurer's elected in a November election, they've got till October to take office, so there's plenty of time to get trained.
If that transition happens that way and the person that's leaving is willing to train. It's amazing to me to see some of the dysfunction in counties between offices. I went to a new county and they had the door boarded up between the clerk and the treasurer. They don't get along. They don't speak. They don't talk. And to me, you can't run a good government or company when you can't work as a team. So,
Don't forget, we had a county commissioner lock the treasurer out of her office.
there you
that's
go.
right.
Well, I just think that, I think that probably the staff that we have in our treasurer's office are
Yeah,
very
they're-
competent and they know what they're doing.
And they're a while.
They have been well trained and
I think so.
can function in what is required in their jobs. But
I agree with you.
so that's where the when you just are elected by popularity versus qualification, you can have there's going to be a gap until that person can get up to speed or they know what they're that they get the training that is necessary to do the job.
And they need to be willing to accept the training, even
right.
if it's from people they feel is subordinate to them.
Exactly.
Because those are the people that know.
Right.
Yeah. And to me as a commissioner, I was a council member in my small town for a few years, and then I was the clerk for a while, and now I'm the auditor, which this is the best spot of all, I'm telling you right now. But as a commissioner, I can't imagine the frustration you would feel if you have an elected official who is not doing their job or is causing discourse and trouble, and there's really nothing you can do that I know of. Because I just don't think there is, and to me that's frustrating. Even as an owner at Varney's, there's times I want to do certain things with staff, and I can't do that either. But
Let me go sideways with that real quick to throw something out there, and this is not even totally, but it's just the way I feel after watching last year, not about the audit. What you're saying about experience, I totally agree. When we elect people to state offices, I think there should come to some experience. When you're sitting at the county, or you're sitting at the city, or you're sitting at school, but you've been involved in this, and you see the day-to-day work. If you don't have that experience, when you get elected on popularity, and you're sitting in Topeka, you really don't know what's going on locally. I'm not talking about any of our legislators. I'm just talking in general. I think it works better when you've got some experience. It's like people on this thing, if they want to go run for state office, they've got the experience of doing this. A lot of us have worked for counties and cities, and Vicki and even the Choo-Choo Man over there's been on for a while. But I'm telling you, I think you have to get that knowledge, or when you get up there, then you're really lost.
well, and I think the R&R is a perfect example of legislators making laws that make no sense, and they create total havoc across the state. But there's not a thing you can do about it.
Right.
Because they're up there making the laws, but they don't know how it has to be implemented and what the implications are. So again, frustration there. probably a good thing we have to sell out at 68. I got 5 more years. I'm probably getting cynical in my old age, but it's common sense. If you don't understand the process, how can you make the laws?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Legislators, I know you're listening, but I'm not saying it's on them. I just think the experience, going back to what you're talking about, somebody in the office, or what Commissioner Cobb was saying, somebody's been experienced in that area, it's a lot easier to see what's going on than have to be thrown into it and not really have some kind of experience. Off the soapbox, moving on.
And then I want to say one more thing before we get off the soapbox. And in the county, some of the best treasurers and clerks are the ones that started out as the payroll clerk.
Yeah.
They started out as the janitor even. They know the organization from the bottom up.
That's where I'm going.
That's what I'm saying. But if there needs to be some level of qualification that says, I know what this entails.
I know a debit from a credit.
Right.
If I want to be the treasurer, I should know the difference between a debit and a credit, and it's different in a bank. Banks have it all backwards, but
That's another story.
So let me ask you, take another issue that we've had, and that I've not been satisfied that has been resolved adequately, but it appears that there's no way to resolve it, was a theft in the Treasurer's Department, $10,000 missing, never found, never located, have no idea, and we've just had the kind of trust that, these audits that you've done have turned out seemingly okay these past 4 years, but I just don't feel 100% comfortable with it,
So you're never going to feel comfortable once something like that happens. Going back and revisiting that, I don't see validity to that because nothing was done then. I believe when we first came out, it was our first year, and Janet said, we have this problem. And so I said, we are not forensic auditors. I recommended Scott Lloyd, Russell Shipley, whoever. I believe you went with Russell Shipley, who then left his firm, so you went with St. Gilmore, which was the firm he was with, and they came in and did procedures. But even based on what they found, no action was taken at that time. So I'm not sure now if you go back to revisit it again, is there any action that can be taken now? So let's move forward. So what is the important thing? I think during that process, they gave some new procedures and some new things that were to be followed, and we did follow up. We got a copy of that report, and then we checked to make sure those policies and procedures were put in place and were being followed, which they were. Now, having said that, it's always good to keep updating your policies and procedures because technology changes every day, which changes every procedure and policy and process that you have around it. So you've always got to be cognizant of, okay, we have a new process, so have a new software and a new procedure. Does our process still cover us from the theft and making sure more than one person is looking at things and cross-checking and doing that thing? You're never going to get absolute assurance that nothing's going on, even with our audits. There could have been $10,000 stolen from the treasurer's office and we could miss it. We don't guarantee. That's why we say we don't guarantee if there was something done wrong, we're going to catch it. We can't. But all we can do is, are the processes there? Are people following those? We do fraud inquiries. We send them to you. We send them to department heads. We talk to people that are not department heads. Do you ever see something that looks like they're trying to override the control? So we do some of that. But you're never going to get that absolute.
But I can understand a new treasurer coming in how they would feel as well,
Well, again, a new treasurer coming in, would need to understand what policies and procedures are in place and how does that protect, and it never hurts to look at processes and procedures. But you're never going to feel absolutely sure that nothing's going wrong anywhere.
Because we were very upset about that happening. And
say the least.
And we have no idea, even to this day,
Yeah.
So anyway, off our soapbox.
All right. So just a couple more things. On page 11, we always like to just point out the county's debt. So you have GO bonds, you have revolving loans, and then you have a lease with Motorola, which actually was paid off during 2023. So we show you your beginning balance and all your payments, and then ending balance, interest paid, and then maturities are down below for all of the debt. There is also some more information in your financials that aren't really required. Your county does present some extra stuff in the footnotes just to have more visibility and transparency with the public. Now let's flip to page 17. So part of our audit is we look to see, did you comply with statutes? And one of those big ones is the budget law. And so page 17 demonstrates the funds that are listed on this page are the funds that are budgeted with the state of Kansas. And this page demonstrates that all of the funds were under budget for the year. So no fund overspent their legal budget. You might wonder what that $226,000 sitting there in the budget credit column is. It's true all the time, but especially since COVID and just after COVID, there have been a lot of grants that were given that weren't expected. So when you receive a grant for a special purpose and then you spend it, if you didn't have budget for it, you would be over budget.
Yeah.
So they allow you a credit of the amount you received to offset so that it doesn't violate your budget.
Like ARPA funds and CARES Act?
Yeah, this was probably, Council on Aging, something with meals, transportation, something. Then I'll go through the general fund, and I'm not going to go through the rest of the funds, but the general fund is your largest fund, and so it has multiple pages. We start at the top with your receipts. So this gives you the same numbers you saw on the first financial, but this gives you more detail where the money comes from, where the funds come from. So you can see for receipts, you collected $31,800,000. You budgeted to receive $29 million, so you received 2.5 more. You always budget conservatively, so that's no surprise there. And then we go down through. I always like to pick on the commissioners because they're always first. So the commissioners actually spent more in their budget than they had, but that's okay because the budget law applies to the fund in total. So as you look down, commissioners were over by $48,000. But if you go to the next line, the county clerk, Janet, she was under by 100, so she covered you guys. So that's kind of how it works. So if you have a bad apple. Not that you are.
Are you calling us a bad apple?
If you haven't bad, not you. I was going to rephrase, and not your sheriff. Many times we see the sheriff's department in a general fund is always over budget, and then everybody else absorbs it. And they have reasons, and I don't knock them at all. I appreciate everything that they do, but it's okay.
Don't write that down, John. We're not bad apples. That was just a statement. Please take away your pen
Don't
from
put
the
that
paper.
in paper. No. So the budget law is in total by fund. So if you flip back quickly to page 21, you'll see that for the general fund in total, you were under budget by $174,000. So it is fine for each line. It's really more of a management tool internally.
It's still very close.
Yeah, that's getting on your tip. Yeah,
Well, but now you have to stop and remember also that you make transfers. So when you got to the end of the year, you said we have money left over, so we're going to move things to our reserve fund. So that all is part of that total. So if you go back to page, where is the little guy? I just had it. If you go to page number 13, this is a list of the transfers. So in the general fund alone, you transferred $6.3 million to the employee benefit fund. You transferred $1.1 million to equipment reserve. You put $300,000 in capital improvement. And so there's, $8 million, $7 million that you moved out of general that's in that grand total. And moved it. You didn't spend it. You moved it to another spot. Now, the employee benefit you probably did spend because when it got over there, you needed it. But the amounts that you took to the reserves are there for future expenditures. All right, now if you will flip to the very back, I mentioned the federal audit. Page 51 is where it starts. There are 2 additional reports required. So, as I mentioned, you're subject to government auditing standards. So this is our report over internal control in accordance with government auditing standards. If we found a deficiency in internal control over federal money, it would be cited here, which we did not. And back to your question, Commissioner Stephen, if we had found that depository coverage was a problem every day and no one knew what they were doing, it would have been a significant deficiency in the front report. So no deficiencies, federal funds. What we do, and I'm going to talk about page 53, but I want you to look quickly at page 55 first. So 55 is a list of your total federal expenditures by program. And as you can see, your largest one was your, it used to be Spark, then it was ARPA, now it's CLS, FRF. So whatever you want to call it, your COVID-19 money, the second number down, you expended $1.175737 during 2023. As a KMAG government and as auditors, we're required to test 40% of your total federal expenditures. So by testing that fund, that program, we were able to get our coverage. So that's the program we detail test. But these are the rest of the programs that your county administers. And you can see about halfway down under Aging cluster, the special programs for the aging, there's your grants that came in for aging that we showed as a budget credit back there. So then back to page 53, this is the report that talks about what we found when we tested that program. And again, we have an unmodified opinion. We found there were no findings with that program. And what we do is we test the procedures around how do you approve the bills that you're going to spend for it. What is the process for that approval? And Debbie was very helpful. She maintains all those ARPA files for us and has them at her fingertips when we come. And then, of course, county administrator is doing the reporting and reviewing. Janet's reviewing as well. So there's a great process around what you're doing. Many counties hired firms to administer that money for them. And many counties, I about faint when I see the amount they paid them. I'm thinking, maybe I should have learned how to do that and done that and said this. But I mean, just think about the money that was saved by this administration by being willing to add that to their plate to do that work. And that saved that money to be used for things in your community and your surrounding area. So I always want to point that out because that's extra work on their shoulders that they're not getting paid extra for. So that's really my report. I want to say how happy I am Janet survived and what a pleasure it's been to work with her through the years. And yeah, we've loved working with your firm, and we would hope that you would consider renewing with us again. We do have about 12 people on our team, and so we can rotate. And every year we normally do rotate people that work on the audit because we really want to give a new, fresh set of eyes to things.
Yeah.
So, can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
What's the standard for the industry as far as how often a government entity rotates?
There really is no standard. I'm always proud to say most of our clients we just keep. Now, some of them will say, we do want you to rotate the partner in charge or we want you to rotate the lead. But we do have some that will go out every 5 years. Some will go every 3. But generally, and like even schools, cities, and other entities, it's a combination of 3 to 5 generally. Because 1 year isn't enough because it takes forever to set things up. 3 years, you're getting a good familiarity, but one of the things we also have to watch for in auditing is professional skepticism. So I'm very complimentary of Janet and her team, but I also have to remember that I have to be skeptic and know that Janet could be stealing money right out from under my nose, and I can't think just because she's a nice lady that I don't have to check the boxes and look at things.
Well, when I was in city administrator for Lansing for 7 years, the auditor, always the head auditor of that firm, and I'm sorry, I can't remember, they always brought out different staff to do the audit. Usually there's about 4 or 5 of them totally, and every year was a different person, just for the reason you're saying.
Right. Was that Tony Kramer?
No, it was not Tony. It was one.
Cochran and Head. Yeah.
Guys, I can't remember. We used them for years. They were out of Topeka. I can't use them for years.
Cochran and Head was at Topeka. Could have been Burbage.
Yeah.
Burbage Trahan,
they were great, and they worked well because a lot of times when they needed some reports, our staff out there, Beth Stanover, who's still the finance director, they called for it about a month ahead of time, so it'd be ready, so we wouldn't have to go through all the files. And if before I took over as city manager, we got a few management letters, and we wanted to make sure those things had been corrected. So you're right on what you're talking about those issues like that. But I'm glad. I appreciate this report. It lets me know. But I do have one question for you. I've seen these for lots of years. If you wanted to do an audit that you wanted to go into more detail on, something like that, would there be is it something that the treasurer would want to do, or is that something that could be done to intensify or dig deeper into what you've given us? Am I making sense what I'm trying to say?
So are you asking, like, hiring a forensic auditor?
Yeah, something to go and look a little more on the numbers than the general pulling out a random that you have to do. Mm-hmm. If you went a step further, so as an auditor, we're always open to, and that's why we say we work for you year round. We're always open to your suggestions if you feel there's an issue in an area. So one of the things we did in the treasurer's office after the 2019 thing, starting in 2019, is we tested some of the levies and the distribution. So
We can always dive deeper in an area. If you have an area you feel there's concern, like the one year we dove into payroll a lot deeper. I mean, we test it all anyway, but we could dive deeper into an area.
Well, if you were missing $10,000, which I'm very disappointed this was never brought to court, if you're missing $10,000, wouldn't that check the little box that you'd want to go deeper
well, yeah,
to the
you
next
would
year?
want to know, well, exactly, which is why I feel like administration at the time, your governing body hired someone to go in and dive into that forensically, because you had an accusation there was fraud.
Yeah, but we didn't hire. Never mind. Okay, I got you.
There was a very. I mean, we didn't. We referred it to the sheriff, and then
Then they
moved it up
there.
to wherever
Yes.
they moved it up to. But the treasurer at that time decided to initiate a. I don't even know what the title of that type of an audit was. A very limited
Scope
audit within a certain.
Right, with the
framework
firm out of
days.
Manhattan.
The money
Right.
was taken.
And we did find out not that hasn't even been totally implemented as far as what the results were when we questioned the treasurer the other day. But
That's not correct.
it was because
They are all
well, I
in
mean,
place.
he
No,
wasn't
the treasurer
aware of it, I
wasn't
guess.
aware
That's
whether or not they were in place.
I questioned it here, and it was the answer was that they
Yeah.
were not aware of it. That's the answer.
You're right.
And so, but anyway, that was not really an audit, though.
Well, I don't know what you engaged them to do. I'm assuming it was a forensic audit, which is what you were asking for at the
I
time.
think it was from the treasurer. We didn't engage anyone. It
Okay.
was the treasurer's office.
So, yeah, I've seen the report, but it's been 4 years. But I believe it might have been a special procedures. It might not have been a full forensic audit. It might have been agreed upon procedures. When what that is they come in and they say, but I don't think it would have been that, because agreed upon procedures is the client tells you what you want them to do, want you to do, and then they go in and do it. But I feel like it was a larger scope than that.
And I'm not here talking about what's done in the past, something like that. I think they tried to do a good job. We made some changes and recommendations. What I was getting at is we see something in the future. We should be doing.
You should be telling your auditor.
Yes,
Yes.
and maybe we'll have to spend on a few more dollars, but go deeper and to make sure.
Well, and probably not a few more dollars. We can do it. It's part of our engagement.
Mark, write that down.
That's what.
Write that down.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll stand by that. But that's why we send you those governing body questionnaires.
I understand.
Procedures.
I understand.
Is there an area you feel like there's a chance for? And we meet. Like I know I've met with Vicki a few times. I've met with some of you in an independent conversation. So we want to know those things.
And I know things are going to happen. When I was in Lansing, I was a mayor out there too. Things are going to happen. I get that, but there's got to be a little box or a little thing, a red flag that runs up and says, "Okay, we need to initiate this now."
Yes.
Since we've got some kind of concerns, and that's where I was going with it.
Right.
Not what's happened in the past,
Yeah. Yes.
or the things that are going on now, or whatever. Just is there something that will check that box so we know that we can say, "Okay, we need to go a little bit further," because county commissioners. My understanding is can go and do this anyway because it's the taxpayers' dollars.
But you have to know there's an issue, and the issue that happened was brought to our attention immediately. So, I mean, and even to begin to the process of finding out about it, and then keeping track of what happened following that. That theft was immediately reported
Turned
to
over
law
to
enforcement and to the Board of County Commissioners. So there wasn't something that was missed as far as auditing and all those things. There was a theft, there was a report made to the Sheriff's Department, and then a meeting with the Board of County Commissioners to discuss what had been discovered and what was being done at that time.
And I will say that the purpose of an internal control system is not to prevent fraud. You can't. If
I
you
understand
have a
that.
collusion, there's no way.
Right.
But you caught it. That tells me the system that was in place was strong enough that you caught the error, the fraud. And then you move forward and you make sure you keep your processes and improve them as you go. Sometimes it's great just to brainstorm in a department. Sit down with all those people in the treasurer's office and say, how could you steal money if you wanted to?
And that's some of the questions you get asked in an audit anyway.
Right, yeah, that's
what
the-
would you do? How
would you do it? And I hate those questions because it's almost like we're giving them ideas, but really, they're the ones in there every day, and they say, well, I know that if I don't do my part here, they could do this and nobody would know.
Right.
So it sounds like your controls were good. It happened. It's going to happen. Now, whether the right action was taken afterwards to cause people to say, I'm not doing that because look what happened to that person. I don't know what the end result was. But if you let people get by with that kind of thing, it's going to continue until.
And
you
there's
put
where I
your
was
foot down.
going. We don't have any report or anything. The person or whoever was held accountable, it stopped because the agencies that it reported to, not the sheriff's department, they went on like that, did not take it any further. So you're still missing the funds sitting there when if we'd had somebody else come in and take a look at it, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying somebody, that we're responsible for this $10,000. And it happens all the time, and we don't even know about it. I understand that. But you just got to make sure we got those boxes checked, that we're doing everything we can. From what you're saying, it sounds like we're doing that. So, okay.
And if you knew who took it, then we're back to was it the treasurer who didn't want to take action? Because now we're back to you having no control over what you really want to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
I have one last question. For the taxpayers, we have this audit, and it's on this issue. Can we be assured that to the best of our ability as commissioners and as the governing body through the audit, that the taxpayers' money is being handled appropriately and that massive fraud is not occurring in any of our departments?
Okay, so I'm going to give two answers. First of all, we did not do an internal control audit.
Yeah.
So I cannot say that you have controls in every place that would prevent a fraud. But I will say that based on testing we performed, which is extensive, we did not see anything that indicated fraud. We are required to look for it, which we do. But again, it's that internal control. There is such a thing as an internal control audit where they come in and they audit your controls. And then, so in auditing, I'm going to back up one little bit. In auditing, there's two approaches. Internal control testing, which if I come in and I say your controls are great, so I'm not going to test the detail of much. I'm going to rely on your controls. Well, in government in Kansas, we're small enough. We never rely on controls. We do the detail testing. So there's the difference. We don't test controls. Now, with the exception of the federal audit, we are required to test the controls over federal money.
Yeah.
So we do test those controls.
Gotcha.
And many times are the same controls that are used on the rest of your process. It's like the expenditures for ARPA, they go through the same process that all your purchasing goes through with a few more caveats added to it. So, but if you wanted an internal control audit, that's a whole nother animal.
But we have no evidence that there's
We saw nothing to indicate
Right.
that fraud was occurring.
Good.
Not only fraud, but under the Yellow Book, we're also supposed to look for waste and abuse. I mean, it's not just fraud. So we saw nothing. If we had seen something, it would be in the report to you, as required by standards.
Right. Very
Just
good.
two things. One, Commissioner, kind of like when you ask some attorneys, not ours, but some attorneys a question, it's hard to nail down an answer because it is impossible for an auditor to come in and say, without doubt,
Right.
Yeah.
there is no fraud.
And they
it's
won't do that.
impossible because you don't audit every single
But that's not what
transaction.
an audit is either.
So what they do is they do their best to determine that there is no fraud
Absolutely.
that they found. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but it doesn't mean it does either. So
Right.
that's that. The second thing I wanted to bring up that was called out was some agencies are paying organizations to manage their ARPA and CARES Act funds. I think I'm correct. It's 10% is what's allowed.
I believe it's 5.
5%.
I think it's 5.
Okay. I think under CARES Act they allowed up to 10, but maybe
Yeah.
ARPA is 5. So that's
A lot of money.
in our case that would be somewhere between the two. It would have been over $3 million that we would have paid an outside agency to manage that, but we were able to handle it internally. So.
And we really appreciate that as well,
That's-
and the job that was done.
That's why we got to take care of employees.
Yep, absolutely.
And that money went to roads, bridges, and infrastructure.
Yep.
The one I drove in on, the beautiful road I drove on? Well,
Yeah.
That was probably a statement.
We're hoping it was.
Well, anyway, it was great. And if you ever have questions and you just want to talk anything through, reach out because we're here for you year round and we want to provide that additional service, even if it's just answering questions.
Thank you.
Right.
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you, Janet.
Guys.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Oh, wait a second. We still got.
Oh, we just got more administrative business?
Yeah. I didn't. Doug, you have anything?
Just that I think today's Harry Truman's birthday.
There you go.
Give them heck.
I just had one. I wanted
In
to,
the war.
Give them heck, Harry.
I want to make it known. I don't see us doing that. I know we did a few years ago. This is Law Enforcement Month. So for all the deputies at the Sheriff's Department, all the municipal state troopers, or anybody that wears a badge, want it to be known that we appreciate you, everything you do, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And we're really thankful that you're out there.
Back to the blue.
Yeah.
Back-
Yeah.
We don't support defunding the police.
Nope.
No.
And the part they play even in watching for these storms. And
Yeah.
Right.
That's all I had.
We've been pretty lucky.
Anybody else have any administrative business?
You ready, Vicki?
Now we'll move on to consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I approve that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second. No further discussion. Begin voting with Commissioner Doug Smith.
Aye.
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 Aye. Consent agenda passes 5-0. Formal board action. Consider a motion to direct staff to notify non-county affiliated tenants of rent rate increase at the Justice Center.
Morning.
Aaron.
Good morning, Commissioners. Today, starting that open request. So when I came to the county, we had a rate of $4.25 for non-county agencies at our Justice Center. That rate hasn't changed. In 2014, I was informed that the building committee was dissolved. We have not had an increase in that. Last week, Tom Cole brought up that the current average rent per square foot is $19.74 for our area. We have a tenant at another building that their current rate is $20.84. This is to start communications with non-county entities using our facilities.
So since the Justice Center was built, the rate has been that?
I believe that the last time that they met about it was in 2014. And
Was
that
there an increase
was
at that
$3.25, and the total combination was $4.25 per square foot with the true up. And on that, they pay percentages of, like when we did the restoration of the parking lot, it's like 14%. Items like that, they pick a
okay.
partial tab
So that's-
of that
all right.
when we do large major projects to
I understand.
the facilities.
Well,
Other
that's
than
how
that,
you can justify being under the fair market. Okay. Makes sense.
but this was to start the conversation as where would you guys like to see that?
So you need
Is
a
your
motion.
recommendation $8.50 square foot?
County administrator and I have discussed back and forth. We've pondered over it. We've looked at it. We've seen the need for an increase. We're looking at the values that we charge other entities. We're looking at values that the entities in Leavenworth have, as well as a CPI, so that this is one of those things that they can plan for increases not to exceed a 4%. So then the county can also take into account inflation as we move forward.
That's still a good rate. I mean, if you look and consider what everything else is going for.
So are you saying this would just be an implemental increase and eventually get to the $19 a square foot?
Well, what the suggestion here is that it moved to $8.50, and then annually after that we do a CPI adjustment not to exceed 4% in any 1 year. And I could probably do the math, but I don't think in our careers we will ever get to $19 a square foot at that rate. But it's just a way that we're annually adjusting it instead of setting on it for 10 to 15 years and then making a big change.
So how did you come up with $8.50?
Well, we took current expenditures, the utility rates, increases over the last 10 years in the cost of staff, time, projects, and so on. And then
it
also,
seems like it should be higher than that.
the other thing
They're doing,
the other thing to keep in mind, and what Aaron was saying, is they also participate with larger projects over there, so that
14%.
helps to offset that. And again, we're not a for-profit agency. We're just trying to make sure we cover our basic expenditures. That's not a lot of, we're not setting aside a lot of depreciation or anything like that. It's just trying to catch up. And I think that's still a pretty good increase, and that's why we wanted to bring it to you to discuss. And if you think that that's not enough, we're certainly willing to listen to that. But that's why we're here today.
Once you adopt this, though, you're basically locking yourself in place, correct? Because you're going
For a year.
to build, well, you're building a CPI on it, but I guess there's nothing saying we couldn't come back with a larger jump later.
The reason for the CPI is basically so that it doesn't sit stagnant for 10 or 15 years and then you look to take a massive hit on somebody. It's every year they can plan
Budget for it,
incremental
yeah.
budget
Yeah.
correctly
Yeah.
so that,
Absolutely.
hey, we're looking at no more than 4%, but this year, like cost of inflation, we were looking at 2.5 this year. If you would have followed those rates, then we would pass along, hey, by the way, 2.5. That's where we're looking at. And then it's just communication to our parties at that building.
If you would have gone back to the original amount, this 425, and did you ever run the numbers of your CPI that all the way through?
I did not, sir.
Just go by the last 4 years, Mike.
I mean, it'd be higher than 850.
Well, we
It
got
would,
it.
sir, but we also have to take into account that doubling is a significant hit to a entity as well.
Yeah, we're not trying.
We're not looking. We're
No,
not looking
no.
to. We're looking to even out our losses on. If you look at the increase that we've sustained from the 05 to 2023, your personnel budget's taken a 41% increase from 05 to 2023. Your contractual and your commodities have taken 18 to 28% increases. We're looking to catch up on the utilities, the water, the items that have taken those jumps that the 425 no longer covers. We're not looking to make money on the facility. We're looking to make sure that those items we're not taking a loss on.
I think Mark, the county administrator, said it right. We're not trying to break the other entity either. I mean, they've got their issues they've got. It's just to have something in place that we can gauge every year now and go up instead of having to wait 5 or 10 years and come back and say we're behind the 8 ball.
We can't subsidize it.
Yeah, that's right.
But
That's
even
right.
at 850, I think we're probably going to be subsidizing them.
You would be a lot closer to not. You're not taking as large of a hit as if you went to the 19 or significantly above there, you would be almost for profit on those items. The 850 puts you in a range that you're comfortably covering your utilities and your items that you have taken previous losses for, and moving forward with a CPI set in place and quality communication between those entities, we can notify them
Yep,
when
yep.
they're doing their budget cycles. We're looking at a 2.5 or a 3, or this year, natural gas prices, doubled, or items like that doubled, or electricity went up significantly. It's just communication from that point forward and making sure that we cover the items that we had taken a loss on or true up.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan to me.
I think so. You ready for a motion?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we direct staff to notify non-county affiliated tenants of the rate increase at the Justice Center to be $8.50 in addition to an annual CIP not to exceed 4%.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll begin voting with Commissioner Doug Smith.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Presentations and discussion items.
I don't really have anything.
No. Mike?
Well, we went to a meeting with the legislators.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Monday night, did go to that.
And I got to be a topic of conversation. How cool for me.
I want your autograph.
Yeah, you might have come up.
You're special. You're special.
Because that's about ridiculous, but okay.
The key thing that I would like to focus in people's attention is that when you're exempting lots of people from property taxes, everybody else is going to pay more of the property tax.
Pick it
So
up.
instead of the legislature focusing on exempting, how about we focus on helping
Everybody,
change the system?
I agree with you 100%.
the old tax shift thing still goes on.
But
That's, I mean, and we are all in favor of all the groups they want to exempt. I mean, my goodness, but we're missing the boat.
But we can't have, it's a shift, it's not a,
Yeah.
it's a
We're in favor of
shift.
I mean, it's not
We're in
like
favor
you're
of the
saying,
groups,
it's
but
not like
not
you're
the
saying, hey,
exemption.
we're cutting the state budget this much, because the state's going to pay this. There was no cuts in the state budget to
But that's-
offset people not paying property tax.
That's why it's probably a good idea to begin to support people who actually have knowledge of
Well,
county government or
Or
the
city
influence of
government, or
there was
cities.
city-
a
Yeah.
group,
That's where I was going.
over at the conference we were at, Commissioners Smith and I, that encouraged county commissioners to run for state rep positions.
Yep.
Even if they were very encouraged.
Because
Yeah.
it takes a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it absolutely takes a bit of time to begin
Right.
to even understand when you
That's
are
what I was
a
going at,
county
Vicki.
commissioner to even.
Yep.
What-
If you just go there and pass a law, that you have to study what the impact is when they pass a law.
Right.
April said it best when she said, if you don't understand the processes, how can you make the laws? That hit it right
I
on the
believe,
head.
yes.
That
And
hit
this
it
is-
right on the head.
Understanding these audits, that's educational.
It is, and
And-
it's important. And if you've not ever been through,
Yeah.
the an audit itself, like our staff has, as
All
the
of
city
us are.
has, as I have as a nonprofit executive director at
Yep.
a point, you don't really fully understand what the purpose of the audit is, what it looks for, how it's, and the difference between a forensic audit
Yeah.
and
What they're trying to get to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
all of those things. There's
I
a
agree.
huge difference between all those processes, and that what we have received here is an excellent presentation
Yep.
given to us that contains all that information, and it's available for review to the public if they would like to look at the audit.
Right.
One of the legislators brought up that he was on a transportation committee and worked on all the briefings for getting all the legislation handled on the floor of the House. And I was just wondering where our money for Leavenworth County was from.
No kidding.
Well, the ex-
I haven't seen any.
You can
just
answer
the
it.
As the
history
sixth
of
largest county?
everything that's been, like you said,
Checks
the
in the mail.
LAVTR, the business machinery, the mortgage filing fees, all that stuff has impacted our local government to have to increase our budgets.
I've looked at-
And we've done it without increasing the mill levy. So,
We've even been bringing the mill levy down.
right. The last mill levy increase here was in 2015.
Oh yeah, we went level.
No, but
You went
they
down.
had to, it was a year before I got here, but it was for the 2016 year, but that was to fix the roof on the Justice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They raised it and then they brought it back down.
Uh-huh.
That's correct.
So, we've allowed to absorb all this stuff
But that's-
without raising the mill levy.
But it's also why it's important to have the latitude and the ability to make those adjustments back and forth when you do have something like happen with the Justice Center to address.
Or the
or
roof. Or the roof.
Yeah, well, I didn't
Back
want
to
to go
the-
there right now.
The business machinery tax was supposed to be paid by the state for 10 years to get the county to transition into it, and they paid it for 6 months.
But I'm just saying that's why
So-
the legislation with revenue neutral is flawed.
Yeah, it is
Because
bad.
it puts that type of a stranglehold on municipalities,
Yeah.
county, cities, and to address things that happen that are completely unanticipated.
Mike, tell you?
Transparency part is good.
Yes.
That's but I wish we had a third option, which would be rate of inflation. Let it go up, revenue neutral or rate of inflation, or
How about
get
this?
more options.
How about this? Let local government control
Govern.
local or
Oh, that
local
whole
operations.
rule thing.
Well,
What a new
Yeah.
concept.
Our
but
job.
keep the transparency part.
Right,
But,
which is
you
fine
know-
with, but we've always had, our budgets have always been
It's always required a
announced.
public hearing.
There's always been a
notification.
public hearing. It's always been where the public was more than welcome to come in and listen and
We've had discussions among ourselves that we didn't agree on.
The tax
So,
lid.
Yeah.
We never did go out for a
Right.
vote. We never exceeded the rate of inflation on the tax, under the tax lid.
because
So,
we care about our taxpayers.
Absolutely.
And I
I'm
think we
telling
care
you.
about them more than people at other levels
this
of government.
year's going to be the tough one, so.
And, I've been in a very fortunate time being on this commission is we've been able to raise salaries every year. That's something that when you're in a bad economy, you can't always do that. And it's been really good. And this year will be a little challenging with some of the issues we're facing.
Absolutely.
Vicky, you?
That all you have, Mike?
Who's next?
That's all I got.
Vicky, you have anything?
I went, and you were also but I attended the Casa Night at the Races this past weekend, which was a really fun, good event, and I always support if ever possible, our local charities, and so it was a good event, and I think there was a thing for the 4-H, wasn't there? Wasn't
Was that last? It already was
last
that was the
week.
week before.
the week before? Okay.
Mr. Culberson.
That's
You bought all the
Yeah.
stuff.
You went to Lansing Education.
Yeah, we
Oh,
did.
and both Mike and I, we did go to the Lansing Education Foundation board meeting, and that was a lot of
Which is
fun.
great.
It was a really good,
turnout.
and the presenter was really
Yeah,
good.
he really
He was
was.
an alum, and it was great.
I just have one. I also was fortunate enough to cook the old doggies for the Dave Trinkle Jr., late Dave Trinkle Jr.'s fishing derby. Even though it cleared out for a couple hours, just a couple hours, so those suicide fish could jump on those young kids' hook, and a great time was had by all. It was just a good thing to see those young people out there, because they all get weighed. And you should see how proud they are of those little fish. But that was a really good thing that Lansing put on. That's all I have.
All right. I don't have anything this week, so I'll entertain a
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Have a work